The morning sky over Seoul turned black as massive ships blocked out the sun. Jinho Park stood on his apartment balcony, watching the alien vessels descend like dark clouds. He had been a captain in the Korean military for 8 years, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. The ships were enormous, each one the size of a city district. They moved without sound, casting shadows that made the temperature drop 10 degrees. People in the streets below pointed and screamed. Cars crashed as drivers forgot to watch the road. Children cried as their parents grabbed them and ran. Jinho's phone buzzed with emergency alerts, but the messages made no sense. Unknown aircraft over major cities worldwide. Military forces responding. Stay indoors. The last message simply said, God help us all. The attack began at exactly noon. Beams of blue light shot down from the ships, and wherever they touched, buildings turned to dust. The presidential palace vanished in seconds. The military base, where Jinho had worked for years, became a smoking crater. In 20 minutes, every major government building in Seoul was gone. Jinho ran to his car and drove toward the city center. The roads were packed with people trying to escape, but there was nowhere to go. The alien ships hung over every major city on Earth. Radio reports came in from around the world. New York was burning. London was under attack. Tokyo had gone silent. At a makeshift command post near the Han River, Jinho found other soldiers trying to organize a defense. Colonel Kim was shouting orders into a radio, but no one was responding. The main base is gone, he told Jinho. Everything's gone. We're on our own. The aliens landed their troops that evening. They were tall and thin with gray skin and large black eyes. They wore dark armor that seemed to absorb light. Their weapons fired the same blue beams as their ships, and anything hit by those beams simply stopped existing. The human military fought back, but their bullets bounced off alien armor. Their tanks exploded before they could fire a shot. Fighter jets fell from the sky like burning leaves. In 3 days, organized resistance ended. In a week, the aliens controlled every major city on Earth. Commander HFY watched the conquest from his command ship. He was pleased with how quickly it had gone. His species, the Veltari, had conquered 17 worlds before Earth. Usually it took months to break a planet's defenses. Humans had fallen in days. Casualties? He asked his aide, Sub-Commander Yethra. Minimal on our side, Yethra reported. Human loss is estimated at 2 billion. Remaining population is approximately 5 billion. HFY nodded. Begin Phase 2, set up processing camps. Sort the humans by age and skill. The strong ones will work in the mines. The smart ones will help us understand their technology. The rest? He made a gesture that meant disposal. The processing camps went up quickly. Humans were rounded up by the thousands and loaded onto transport ships. Families were separated. Children were taken from their parents. The elderly and sick were loaded onto different ships that never landed anywhere. Jinho found himself in Camp 7 Alpha, a massive compound surrounded by energy barriers. The aliens had built it in what used to be a farming area outside Seoul. Thousands of humans were crowded into metal buildings with no windows. They got 1 meal a day and water that tasted like chemicals. In the camp, Jinho met Minji Lee. She had been an engineer at Samsung before the invasion. Now she spent her days taking apart broken alien equipment, trying to understand how it worked. Their technology is amazing, she told Jinho, but it's not magic. It follows rules just like ours. Taewon Kim was younger, barely 25. He had been a medical student before the war. Now he treated injured prisoners with whatever supplies he could find. The aliens didn't provide medical care for humans. If someone got sick or hurt, they either got better on their own or they died. The Veltari had a system for breaking conquered species. They called it the Behavioral Correction Protocol. First, they destroyed the old government and military. Then they separated families and communities. Finally, they used hunger, fear, and punishment to make people obey. It had worked on 17 other worlds. The aliens expected it to work on Earth too. But something strange happened in Camp 7 Alpha. On the 3rd day, when the aliens brought the daily food ration, Jinho noticed an old woman collapse from hunger. Without thinking, he gave her half his meal. Other prisoners saw this and began sharing their food too. The Veltari guards watched in confusion. According to their data, hungry creatures always fought over food. They didn't share it with the weak. This was basic biology. Every species they had conquered followed this rule. Commander Kethvar received the first reports about human behavior after 1 week. The prisoners are not responding as expected, Yethra told him. They share resources. They help the injured. They're forming social groups across family lines. Increase the stress, Kethvar ordered. Reduce food by half. Increase work hours. They'll break, but the humans didn't break. When food became scarcer, they shared more carefully. When work became harder, the strong helped the weak. When guards punished one person, others stepped forward to take their place. Jinho became a natural leader in the camp. He organized work groups and made sure everyone got equal shares of food. He settled arguments before they became fights. He helped people remember that they were still human, even in this place. Minji continued studying alien technology. She was careful to hide her progress, but she was learning fast. The Veltari used quantum processors and energy crystals that humans had only theorized about. If she could understand how they worked, maybe she could build something useful. Taewon set up a secret medical station in an abandoned building. He treated not just physical injuries, but also helped people deal with fear and sadness. He noticed that prisoners who helped others seemed stronger and healthier than those who only thought about themselves. After 1 month, Kethvar was frustrated. Every other species had shown signs of breaking by now. The strong should have started bullying the weak. Communities should have split apart. Leaders should have emerged to collaborate with their captors. Instead, the humans were becoming more organized. They had their own system of government inside the camps. They shared information and resources. They even sang songs together in the evenings, which made no logical sense to the Veltari. Perhaps we need to adjust our approach, Yethra suggested during a command meeting. Kethvar's eyes narrowed. No, increase pressure again. Double the work quotas. Reduce food to starvation levels. They will break, just like all the others. But even as he gave these orders, Kethvar felt a small doubt growing in his mind. What if humans were different? What if the behavioral correction protocol wouldn't work on this species? He pushed the thought away. Every species broke eventually. Humans would be no different. 3 months after the invasion, the Veltari behavioral analysts were confused. Their reports showed patterns that made no sense according to their science. Dr. Yelshan, the Empire's top expert on conquered species psychology, stood before Commander Kethvar with data that challenged everything they knew. The humans continue to behave illogically, Dr. Yelshan reported. In Camp 7 Alpha, they have established what they call a buddy system. Strong prisoners are paired with weak ones. The strong share food and help with work, receiving nothing in return. Kethvar studied the holographic displays showing camp activities. And the weak ones? Do they try to exploit this arrangement? No, sir. The weak ones often volunteer for dangerous tasks to protect their stronger partners. Yesterday, an elderly human named Park Soo-hyun threw himself at a guard to prevent punishment of a younger prisoner. He knew he would be beaten, possibly killed. This made no sense to Kethvar. Every conquered species followed the same pattern. The strong dominated the weak submitted or died. It was the natural order that made conquest possible. In Camp 7 Alpha, Jinho had indeed created the buddy system after watching too many prisoners collapse from exhaustion. He paired younger prisoners with older ones, healthy with sick, skilled with unskilled. The idea was simple. Everyone looks after someone else. Hyunwoo Choi had been a high school teacher before the invasion. Now he ran secret classes for the children in the camp. Using charcoal on metal scraps, he taught them to read and write. When guards passed by, the children pretended to be playing games. "Why do we need to learn?" asked a young girl named Sunny. "The aliens control everything now." Hyunwoo smiled sadly. "Because knowledge is something they can't take away from us. As long as we remember who we are and where we come from, we're still free inside." Dr. So-Young-han had been a surgeon at Seoul National University Hospital. In the camp, she became something between a doctor and a counselor. She treated injuries with improvised tools and helped people deal with the trauma of losing everything. The aliens offered her a deal: work in their medical research facility, help them understand human biology, and receive better food and housing. Many prisoners told her to accept. It would be better for everyone if she stayed healthy and strong. So-Young refused. "If I help them understand our bodies, they'll use that knowledge to hurt us better. I won't be part of that." Instead, she continued her underground medical practice using techniques learned from her grandmother, who had been a traditional healer. She treated infections with fermented foods, set bones with scrap metal, and performed surgery with sharpened plastic. Meanwhile, Minji had made a breakthrough with the alien technology. Working in secret, she had figured out how their communication devices worked. The Veltari used quantum entanglement to send messages instantly across vast distances. The science was advanced, but the basic principles were understandable. She began building a crude communicator using parts salvaged from broken alien equipment. It took her 2 months of careful work, hiding pieces in different locations and only assembling them at night. When it was finished, she contacted Jinho. "I think I can reach other camps," she whispered. "We could coordinate with other resistance groups." Jinho was amazed. "How many camps can you reach?" "I don't know yet. But if other people are doing what we're doing, we could organize something bigger." The first contact came from Camp 12 Beta, located in what used to be Busan. The response came from someone calling himself Teacher Kim. Hyunwoo nearly cried when he heard the voice through Minji's improvised speaker. "We have 300 people here," Teacher Kim reported. "We're sharing food and taking care of the sick. The aliens keep increasing our work quotas, but we're finding ways to meet them without anyone dying." More camps joined the network over the following weeks. Camp 4 Gamma near Incheon, Camp 18 Delta in the mountains, Camp 23 Echo by the coast. Each camp had developed similar survival strategies independently. Each had leaders like Jinho, engineers like Minji, healers like Soyoung and Taewon. Sub-Commander Yethra noticed the change in camp productivity. Despite increased quotas and reduced rations, human output remained steady. More disturbing, prisoner health was actually improving in some facilities. "How is this possible?" Kethavar demanded. "They should be weakening." "Unknown, sir. We've placed surveillance devices throughout the camps, but humans seem to communicate without speaking. They use hand signals, eye contact, and body language in ways our translators cannot decode." What Yethra didn't know was that the humans had developed a complex system of nonverbal communication. A hand on the shoulder meant "I'll take your shift." A certain way of sharing food meant "guard patrol, coming." Children played games that were actually coded messages between adults. The resistance network grew stronger each day. Jinho organized work teams that could adjust their productivity to protect weaker members. If someone was sick, others would work faster to cover for them. If guards were watching, they would slow down together to avoid anyone standing out. Hyunwoo's teaching expanded beyond children. He began holding secret classes for adults, sharing not just basic education but also history, philosophy, and arts. People learned about great human achievements, about times when ordinary people had overcome impossible odds. "We're not the first to face something like this," he told a group gathered in the darkness. "Throughout history, humans have survived by helping each other. We're stronger together than apart." Soyoung's medical network became crucial to the resistance. She trained other prisoners in basic first aid and disease prevention. More importantly, she helped people maintain mental health in impossible conditions. "The aliens want us to despair," she explained to her students. "They want us to give up hope and become animals. But hope is a choice. We choose to believe in tomorrow." Taewon had been working with Soyoung since the beginning. He was younger and less experienced, but he had something that amazed even the veteran doctor. He showed the same care for injured Veltari soldiers as he did for human prisoners. When a guard was accidentally injured during a work accident, Taewon immediately went to help. Other prisoners tried to stop him. "Let the aliens suffer," they said, "after what they've done to us." But Taewon shook his head. "If we become like them, we lose who we are. Helping others is what makes us human." The guard survived because of Taewon's treatment. Word of this incident spread through the Veltari ranks. Some soldiers began to look at human prisoners differently. How could a species be dangerous if they helped their enemies? By the end of the 3rd month, the resistance network connected 15 camps across the Korean peninsula. Similar networks were forming in other countries. Messages came in broken English from camps in America, Europe, and Africa. Everywhere, humans were showing the same impossible behavior. Commander Kethvar received increasingly troubling reports. Productivity in the camps was not collapsing as predicted. Prisoner health was stabilizing despite reduced rations. Most disturbing of all, some Veltari guards were beginning to question their orders. "Perhaps we should reconsider our approach," Yethra suggested carefully. "The humans are not responding to traditional methods. Kethvar's anger flared. Traditional methods work because they are based on universal biological principles. These humans are not special. Increase security. Find their leaders and eliminate them. They will break. But even as he gave these orders, Kethvar felt uncertainty growing in his mind. The Veltari Empire had conquered 17 worlds using the same methods. Those worlds had billions of inhabitants with advanced technology and strong military forces. They had all fallen within months. Earth should have been easy. Humans were a young species with primitive technology. Their planet was divided into competing nations. They should have surrendered immediately. Instead, after 3 months of occupation, human resistance was growing stronger. And more disturbing still, the resistance was beginning to affect his own troops. Something was very wrong with this conquest. Commander Kethvar stood before the holographic display showing Earth's continental masses. Red dots marked the location of processing camps, each housing thousands of human prisoners. After 6 months of occupation, every camp showed the same troubling pattern. Organized resistance that grew stronger under pressure. Implement Project Severance, he ordered. Full protocol. Sub-Commander Yethra hesitated. Sir, Project Severance has never been used on a planetary scale. The psychological effects could be unpredictable. The current situation is already unpredictable. Kethvar replied coldly. These humans refuse to follow basic biological imperatives. We will break their social bonds completely. Project Severance was the Veltari Empire's most extreme psychological warfare technique. It involves separating all family groups, erasing personal histories, and using mind-altering technology to induce deep despair. The goal was to destroy the individual's sense of identity and connection to others. In Camp 7 Alpha, the implementation began at dawn. Veltari soldiers wearing new equipment entered the compound. Their helmets projected beams of strange light that made humans feel confused and afraid. The beams also affected memory, making it hard to remember names, faces, and personal experiences. Families were torn apart with ruthless efficiency. Children were loaded onto transports bound for re-education facilities. Adults were sorted by age and shipped to different camps hundreds of miles away. The buddy system that Jinho had created was deliberately destroyed, with partners sent to opposite ends of the continent. Jinho found himself on a transport ship with complete strangers. The memory-affecting beams had made it difficult to recall faces clearly. He could remember that there had been important people in his life, but their features were blurry. Even his own past felt uncertain. Had he really been a military captain? The memories seemed like stories someone else had told him. But something inside Jinho refused to accept the confusion. During the long flight to his new camp, he began talking to other prisoners. "What do you remember?" he asked an elderly woman sitting beside him. "I had a daughter," she said slowly. "I think. She was smart. An engineer, maybe." "I remember someone like that too," said another prisoner. "She built something. Something important." Gradually, the prisoners began sharing their fragmented memories. One person remembered a teacher who held secret classes. Another recalled a doctor who helped injured guards. Piece by piece, they reconstructed their experiences. "They're trying to make us forget who we are," Jinho realized. "But if we share our memories, we can fight back." At the new camp, designated Facility 15 Omega, the conditions were far worse than before. Prisoners were kept in individual cells with no contact allowed. Food was delivered through slots. There were no work assignments, no activities, nothing to do except sit in silence and let despair take hold. The isolation should have broken them. According to Veltari science, social creatures could not survive prolonged separation from their groups. Within weeks, the prisoners should have become compliant and eager to please their captors. Instead, the humans found ways to communicate. They tapped messages on the walls using a code developed in the old camps. They passed notes through the food delivery slots. They sang softly at night, creating a shared experience even in isolation. Meanwhile, Minji found herself at a re-education facility for technical assets. The Veltari wanted to use her engineering skills, but first needed to break her spirit. They subjected her to daily interrogations, trying to make her forget her past work and identity. "You are prisoner 4847, the interrogator repeated. "You have no name. You have no past. You exist to serve the Empire." But Minji held on to one clear memory, the communication device she had built. She couldn't remember all the technical details, but she remembered the feeling of achievement when it first worked. That memory became an anchor that kept her sense of self intact. The children had been sent to special facilities designed to reshape their minds completely. Dong Yunyu, now 12 years old, found himself in Youth Reconditioning Center 7. The Veltari used advanced technology to implant false memories and erase knowledge of human culture, but the children proved surprisingly resistant to mental manipulation. They formed secret groups and shared stories about their lives before the invasion. Dong Hyun remembered bits of lessons from teacher Hyunwoo and repeated them to other children during brief moments when guards weren't watching. "We are human," he whispered to a group of 6-year-olds. "That means we care about each other, no matter what they do to us. We don't stop caring." Hyunwoo himself was now in a facility for ideological correction. The Veltari had identified teachers as particularly dangerous because they preserved and transmitted culture. The correction process involved weeks of sensory deprivation, followed by constant exposure to Veltari propaganda. Most prisoners broke within days. They accepted new identities as servants of the empire and forgot their human heritage. But Hyunwoo had spent years memorizing human literature, history, and philosophy. Even when the aliens made him forget specific details, the general patterns remained in his mind. During brief exercise periods, he began teaching again. Using scratches in the dirt and movements that looked like stretching exercises, he transmitted information to other prisoners. Stories about human courage, scientific discoveries, artistic achievements, anything that reminded people of who they had been. Dr. So-young found herself in a medical research facility where Veltari scientists wanted to understand human biology. They offered her a choice: cooperate with their experiments on human subjects or be subjected to those same experiments herself. "I took an oath to do no harm," she told her captors. "I won't break that oath for you." They put her in a laboratory cage and used her as a test subject for new psychological weapons. But even under extreme stress, So-young continued to observe and learn. She memorized the aliens' procedures and equipment, looking for weaknesses that could be exploited later. Taewon was assigned to a mobile punishment unit that traveled between camps to demonstrate the consequences of resistance. He was forced to watch public executions and torture sessions designed to break prisoner morale. The experience should have destroyed his compassion and turned him into a broken shell. Instead, Taewon found ways to provide comfort even in the worst situations. A touch on the shoulder of a condemned prisoner, a few words of encouragement whispered during chaos, small acts of kindness that reminded people they were still human. Field Commander Zexhai was responsible for implementing Project Severance at 12 facilities. He had overseen similar operations on other conquered worlds, and they had always succeeded within months. But the human response was unlike anything in his experience. "Status report," he requested from his facility commanders. "Resistance continues at all locations," came the reply. "Prisoners have developed new communication methods. Social bonds are reforming despite separation protocols. Morale remains unexpectedly high." Zexhai reviewed the surveillance recordings from his facilities. What he saw troubled him deeply. Humans were creating new communities even under the worst conditions. They shared resources when they had nothing to share. They comforted each other when comfort seemed impossible. They maintained hope when hope was illogical. Most disturbing of all, some of his own soldiers were beginning to question their orders. Several guards had been caught providing extra food to prisoners. Others had reported feeling uncomfortable with the severity of the psychological treatments. This had never happened before. Veltari soldiers were trained from birth to follow orders without question. The idea that they would develop sympathy for enemy prisoners was unthinkable. After 3 months of Project Severance, Commander Kethvar received the final reports. Human resistance had not been broken. If anything, it had become more sophisticated. The separated groups were somehow maintaining coordination across vast distances. New leaders had emerged in every facility. The prisoners were actually developing new survival techniques that improved their chances of long-term resistance. "How is this possible?" Kethvar demanded. "We have destroyed their families, erased their memories, isolated them completely. They should be broken." Dr. Yelshan, the behavioral specialist, had been studying human psychology for months. His report was deeply unsettling. "Commander, I believe we have encountered something unprecedented." These humans appear to form social bonds based on principles rather than genetics or proximity. Even when separated from their biological families, they create new family structures with strangers. That makes no evolutionary sense, Kethvar protested. No, sir, it doesn't. But the evidence is overwhelming. Humans demonstrate consistent altruistic behavior, even when it provides no survival advantage. They will sacrifice themselves for individuals they have known for only days. This suggests a form of consciousness that our models cannot predict or control. Kethvar stared at the data displays showing continued resistance across every human facility. For the first time in his long military career, he faced the possibility that a species might be truly unconquerable using traditional methods. The thought was terrifying. If humans couldn't be broken, what did that say about the Veltari Empire's other conquests? What did it say about the nature of consciousness itself? 2 years into the occupation, Commander Kethvar made a decision that shocked his entire command staff. He would conduct personal interviews with human prisoners to understand their psychological structure firsthand. No Veltari commander had ever taken such direct interest in the minds of conquered subjects. "Sir, this is highly irregular," Sub-Commander Yethra protested. "Personal contact with prisoners could compromise your objectivity." "My objectivity is already compromised," Kethvar replied grimly. "Every assumption we've made about this species has proven wrong. I need to understand what we're dealing with." The first interview was with Jinho Park, the former military captain who had become a symbol of human resistance. Despite 2 years of imprisonment, separation from family, and constant psychological pressure, Jinho appeared calm and focused when brought before the alien commander. Kethvar studied the human through the transparent barrier that separated them. Jinho was thinner than he had been at capture, with gray streaks in his black hair that hadn't been there before. But his eyes remained alert and determined. "You have been offered collaboration opportunities many times," Kethvar began in carefully pronounced Korean. "Better food, comfortable housing, authority over other prisoners. Why do you refuse?" Jinho considered the question thoughtfully. "Because accepting those things would mean abandoning the people who depend on me. Leadership isn't about personal comfort. It's about service to others. But your resistance is pointless," Kethvar argued. "We control your planet. Your government is gone. Your military is destroyed. Cooperation would benefit everyone, would it?" Jinho asked. "Or would it just make oppression more efficient? You want us to help you enslave ourselves." The directness of the response surprised Kethvar. Most conquered species showed more deference when speaking to their captors. "You could reduce suffering by encouraging compliance. Temporary comfort in exchange for permanent slavery isn't reducing suffering," Jinho replied. "It's just postponing it. Real peace comes from justice, not submission." Kethvar found himself intrigued despite his intentions to remain analytical. "You speak of justice as if it exists independently of power. Justice is whatever the strongest force decides it is." "No," Jinho said firmly. "Justice exists in the relationships between people. When we treat each other with dignity and respect, when we share resources fairly, when we protect the vulnerable, that's justice. It doesn't require permission from authority." The interview lasted 3 hours, far longer than Kethvar had planned. He left feeling more confused than enlightened. Jinho's responses challenged basic Veltari assumptions about the nature of power and social organization. The next interview was with Yunji Kang, an elderly woman who had become the keeper of human stories and traditions. At 73, she was among the oldest prisoners still alive, yet she showed remarkable mental clarity and strength. "Tell me about human history," Kethvar requested. "Your species has a record of constant warfare. How do you reconcile that with your claims about cooperation?" Yunji smiled sadly. "We've made many mistakes, but each generation tries to do better than the last. We learn from our failures and teach our children to be wiser. Yet you continue to fight wars. Yes, but we also continue to build schools, hospitals, and libraries. We create art and music and poetry. We explore space and cure diseases. Humans are capable of great cruelty, but we're also capable of great love. The question is which nature we choose to cultivate." Kethvar was fascinated by this perspective. Veltari society focused only on eliminating weakness and maximizing efficiency. The idea of deliberately choosing compassion over advantage was alien to him. "Why preserve stories and traditions?" he asked. Practical knowledge about technology or military tactics would be more useful for survival. Stories teach us who we are, Yunji explained. They remind us of our values and give us hope for the future. A person without stories is just a collection of biological functions. Stories make us human. She began reciting a traditional Korean folktale about a rabbit who outsmarted a tiger through cleverness and cooperation with other forest animals. As she spoke, Kethvar noticed something remarkable. Other prisoners in nearby cells had stopped their activities to listen. Even some Veltari guards seemed drawn to the sound of her voice. When the story ended, there was a moment of profound silence. Kethvar realized he had been listening as intently as anyone else, despite not understanding the cultural references. The third interview was with 13-year-old Donghyun Yu, who had become a leader among the human children. Kethvar was particularly interested in understanding how human young develop their unusual social behaviors. "Do you remember your parents?" Kethvar asked gently, using the tone recommended for interviewing juvenile subjects. "Not their faces," Donghyun admitted. "The memory machines made that hard, but I remember how they made me feel. Safe, loved, important. And now, do the older prisoners make you feel the same way?" "Different, but yes. Teacher Hyunwoo tells us stories about brave people. Dr. So Young makes sure we stay healthy. Captain Jinho shows us how to be strong without being mean. They're not my birth family, but they're still family." This concept of chosen family was particularly puzzling to Kethvar. Veltari young were raised in group facilities and assigned to mentors based on aptitude testing. Personal bonds were discouraged as inefficient. "Why do you help the younger children?" Kethvar asked. "They cannot help you in return." "They don't need to help me back," Donghyun replied simply. "Taking care of little kids is just what big kids do. Besides, they will help someone else when they get older. It's like planting a tree. You don't plant it for yourself. You plant it for people who come after you." The boy's matter-of-fact explanation of intergenerational responsibility was unlike anything in Kethvar's experience. Veltari society was organized around immediate practical benefits. The idea of investing in others without expectation of return was incomprehensible. But perhaps the most challenging interview was with Taewon Kim, the young medic who treated Veltari soldiers alongside human prisoners. Kethvar had read reports about this individual, but wanted to understand his motivations directly. "You risk punishment by providing medical care to our soldiers," Kethvar observed. "Why?" "Because they're hurt and I can help," Taewon replied. "It's that simple. But these soldiers are your enemies. They guard your prison, enforce harsh conditions, sometimes execute prisoners. Helping them makes no strategic sense." Taewon looked at Kethvar with genuine confusion. "You think helping people has to make strategic sense?" "Of course. All behavior should serve a purpose that benefits survival or advancement." "That's a very sad way to live," Taewon said quietly. "Helping others isn't a strategy. It's just the right thing to do. When I see someone suffering, I want to stop that suffering. It doesn't matter who they are or what they've done." Kethvar found this perspective deeply disturbing. What if helping your enemies makes them stronger and more able to harm you? "Then I hope that by showing them kindness, they might choose not to harm me. But even if they do, I'd rather be someone who helps than someone who ignores suffering." "That makes no evolutionary sense." "Maybe not," Taewon agreed, "but it makes human sense. We're not just animals trying to survive. We're people trying to live with meaning and purpose. Those are different goals." After conducting dozens of these interviews, Kethvar found his worldview fundamentally shaken. Every human he spoke with demonstrated the same basic pattern. They valued relationships and moral principles over personal advantage. They made sacrifices for abstract concepts like justice and dignity. They showed compassion to enemies and strangers. Most disturbing of all, their behavior was affecting his own personnel. Field Commander Zexhai had formally requested asylum with human forces, claiming he could no longer participate in what he called the destruction of the most ethical species we've encountered. Dr. Yelshan had submitted a research proposal to study human social bonding mechanisms for potential application to Veltari society. Several guards had been caught learning human languages and customs during off-duty hours. The contamination was spreading throughout his command structure. Exposure to human values was causing Veltari personnel to question not just their orders, but the fundamental organization of their entire civilization. Sub-Commander Yethra had been documenting these changes with scientific precision. Her reports painted a picture of an occupying force slowly being transformed by the people they were supposed to control. The humans have developed something we lack, she told HFY during a private briefing. They possess mechanisms for forming social bonds that transcend genetics, immediate benefits, or authority structures. These bonds make them remarkably resilient under pressure. And our personnel are developing these same mechanisms? It appears so. Extended contact with humans seems to activate dormant neural pathways related to empathy and cooperation. Several soldiers have reported experiencing what they describe as caring about others for the first time in their lives. HFY stood before the massive view screen in his command center, looking down at Earth's blue and white surface. The planet looked peaceful from space, giving no hint of the profound challenge it represented to everything he had believed about intelligence. More immediately, what did it say about his own future as a comm? The emergency council meeting on the Veltari command ship was unlike any in the Empire's history. Commander HFY faced a panel of High Council members whose expressions showed growing concern about the Earth situation. 18 months had passed since the invasion began, and human resistance was stronger than ever. Explain the delays, demanded Council Prime Velanor, his voice cutting through the chamber's silence. Your reports promised full subjugation within 6 months. We are now approaching 2 years. HFY activated the holographic displays showing data from across Earth. The human species demonstrates unprecedented resistance to standard psychological conditioning. Our behavioral models have proven inadequate for predicting their responses. Sub-Commander, HFY had spent months documenting human behavior patterns that contradicted everything the Veltari understood about survival instincts. Her classified reports contained observations that challenged the Empire's core beliefs about sentient life. Show them the Camp 7 Alpha recordings, HFY ordered. The hologram displayed footage from the original processing camp where Jinho had first organized resistance. Despite being relocated and separated, the former prisoners had somehow maintained their network. New leadership had emerged organically, and the same cooperation patterns were appearing in facilities across the planet. Notice the resource distribution pattern, HFY explained. When food is scarce, humans consistently share with the weakest members first. When work quotas increase, the strongest individuals take on extra burdens to protect others. This behavior occurs in every facility, regardless of cultural background or previous social status. Council member Zartek leaned forward. What about individual interviews? Surely some humans have provided intelligence about their networks. That's the most disturbing aspect, HFY replied. We have conducted over 50,000 individual interrogations. Humans will endure extreme physical and psychological pressure rather than reveal information that might harm their companions. Even children as young as 10 years old maintain this pattern. The council members exchanged worried glances. In their conquest of 17 other worlds, prisoner interrogation had always been the key to breaking resistance networks. Individuals would eventually choose personal survival over group loyalty. It was a universal biological principle. What about collaboration? Asked Councilmember Veltarix. Surely some humans have accepted our offers of improved conditions in exchange for cooperation. HFY pulled up another data file. We have documented 127 cases where humans were offered significant benefits for collaboration. Medical treatment for family members, better food, comfortable housing, positions of authority over other prisoners. The acceptance rate has been 0.2%. Impossible, breathed Velanor. No species maintains group loyalty at such levels. Furthermore, HFY continued, the few humans who did initially accept our offers later sabotaged their own assignments or deliberately provided false information. Many requested to be returned to general population rather than maintain their privileged status. Meanwhile, on Earth, the resistance had evolved into something unprecedented. Jinho, now in his third different facility, had become a symbol of hope across the global network. His original buddy system had been refined and expanded into a complex mutual aid structure that adapted to any conditions the aliens could create. In Youth Reconditioning Center 7, 12-year-old Dongyun had become an unlikely leader. Despite continuous memory alteration treatments, he had developed techniques for preserving and transmitting human culture. He taught other children to hide memories in songs, games, and seemingly random drawings. Remember the story of the ant and the grasshopper? He whispered to a group of younger children during a brief moment when guards were distracted. We are the ants. We work together and help each other even when times are hard. The children had created an elaborate system of communication using playground games. A particular way of jumping rope meant, guards coming. Certain patterns of rock skipping carried coded messages between dormitories. To the Veltari observers, it looked like normal childhood play. In reality, it was a sophisticated intelligence network. Minji had been moved to Advanced Research Facility 12, where the aliens wanted her to help reverse engineer human technology. They had given her access to advanced Veltari equipment and promised eventual freedom in exchange for cooperation. Instead, Minji used her position to study Veltari technology more thoroughly than ever before. She discovered weaknesses in their communication systems and energy distribution networks. More importantly, she learned that several Veltari scientists were beginning to question their empire's methods. Dr. Yeltash, a Veltari behavioral researcher, had been assigned to study Minji's psychological responses. During their sessions, he asked increasingly philosophical questions about human behavior. Why do humans help individuals who are not genetically related? He asked one day. Minji considered the question carefully. Because we understand that we're all connected. When I help someone else, I make the whole community stronger. A stronger community protects everyone better. But what if helping others reduces your own survival chances? Then I'm willing to take that risk, Minji replied simply. Life isn't worth living if you only care about yourself. Dr. Yeltash found himself deeply troubled by these conversations. Veltari society was built on strict hierarchies where individuals competed for resources and status. The idea of voluntary self-sacrifice for strangers was not just foreign, it was incomprehensible. Field Commander Zexhai was experiencing similar doubts. He had been responsible for implementing punishment protocols at multiple facilities, but the results were consistently counterproductive. The harsher the conditions became, the more creative and determined human resistance grew. At Facility 15 Omega, he had witnessed something that changed his perspective forever. A human prisoner named Taewon had been caught providing medical care to injured Veltari guards. According to regulations, this constituted unauthorized contact with alien personnel and carried a death sentence. But when Zexhai arrived to oversee the execution, he found something unprecedented. A group of Veltari soldiers arguing with their commanding officers about the fairness of the punishment. This human saved the life of Trooper Keksavar, argued Sergeant Maytal. He used his own medical supplies and risked punishment to help our wounded. How can we execute someone for showing such honor? The concept of honor was deeply important to Veltari military culture, but it had never been applied to enemy prisoners before. Zexhai found himself unable to carry out the execution order. Instead, he transferred Taewon to a different facility and submitted a report recommending policy review. Dr. So-young had become a legend among human prisoners and a source of confusion among Veltari researchers. Despite being subjected to extreme psychological pressure, she maintained her medical practice under impossible conditions. She had developed new surgical techniques using improvised tools and created medicines from food scraps and cleaning supplies. More disturbing to her captors, she treated injured Veltari soldiers with the same care she gave to human patients. When asked why, her answer was always the same. All suffering deserves compassion. Several Veltari medical personnel had requested transfers after working with So-young. They reported feeling confused and emotionally compromised by her dedication to healing regardless of species or allegiance. Hyunwoo's education network had expanded beyond anything the aliens thought possible. Despite being separated and relocated multiple times, former students carried his teachings to new facilities across the globe. The curriculum had evolved to include not just academic subjects but also moral philosophy and emotional resilience. In Facility 23 Echo, Hyunwoo had begun teaching Veltari guards along with human prisoners. Several young soldiers had started attending his informal discussion groups, asking questions about human ethics and social organization. "Why do humans create art?" asked one guard named Seklon during a work break. "Because beauty gives life meaning," Hyunwoo replied. "When we create something beautiful, we're saying that existence is worth celebrating, even in difficult times." Seklon thought about this for days. Veltari society was focused entirely on efficiency and power. The concept of creating something simply because it was beautiful was revolutionary. Commander Kethvar reviewed these reports with growing alarm. The human resistance was not just maintaining itself, it was converting his own personnel. Dozens of Veltari soldiers had requested reassignment after extended contact with human prisoners. Several had submitted formal complaints about treatment protocols. A few had even been caught providing unauthorized assistance to resistance networks. "We face a contamination scenario," Dr. Yelshan reported during a private meeting. "Prolonged contact with humans is causing psychological changes in our personnel. They are developing what humans call empathy, an irrational emotional response to the suffering of others. Recommend countermeasures," Kethvar ordered. "I'm not certain countermeasures exist," Yelshan replied carefully. "This appears to be a fundamental difference in consciousness structure. Humans possess some form of social bonding mechanism that our species lie